As of 2020, the global gaming market was valued at an estimate amount of $159.3 billion, and it's only growing. Now, if you combined the approximate value of both the movie and the music industries in the same year, they don't even reach half the same value. Here's a little Linus Tech tip. Even with the countless examples and failures of trend chasing, the industry continues to desperately race to stumble upon that mystical pinata that will explode into millions and bajillions of dollars. This phenomenon is one I'll describe as gaming's slippery slope. A slippery slope is described as a course of action that seems to inevitably lead from one action to another with unintended consequences. Normally, this is used to falsely argue blanket statements of something like, if you don't recycle, then you're gonna kill the sea. That kind of like bullshit. Conversely, this isn't true with the gaming industry because we've already reached that point. We are already a landfill of mostly hot, stinky garbage. Predatory business practices have come quite a long way since Todd's barf-colored horse armor. There are a lot more slimy and sneaky ways to manipulate the modern consumer nowadays. So today I, Nathubius, will graciously inform you of situations where this phenomenon will exist.
What the hell is this?
The structure I'll be using will be naming a few companies that are included within the slope that I'm presenting and give other obvious examples to expand on what the slope will entail as you fall down its slow decline. But before any of that, let's lay ourselves out some very baseline definitions. Gaming is usually categorized in 3 different categories: indie, AA, and AAA games. Indie games are often the darlings or the forgotten side of the industry, routinely retaining the slab of creativity of all the industry. They are individuals who make games with a passion and a good idea. AA games is a decent middle ground that finds a niche point between indie creativity and AAA budgets. And AAA games are made by your aggrandized million-dollar companies that have more money than they know what to do with, i.e., EA, Ubisoft, Rockstar, and these fuckers too. There are obvious exceptions, but this is the Dorito landscape of gaming that offers us a variety of experiences. One vertex of the Dorito, though, is back under the seasonal hate train. AAA or modern gaming is probably the most hazy, polarizing topic to objectively discuss. Usually it's spearheaded by 2 camps. One that consumes any and all media while actively chasing criticism to complain about people criticizing the thing they like, and the other are those who call you poor for questioning predatory business practices. If you are in either of these 2 camps, I would recommend leaving this video to go watch Cocomelon, as I think that would better suit your needs. The first company in the ring is a beloved one of mine that sits comfortably at the top of the slope. At least for now. Capcom are currently destroying the competition with a pretty solid lineup of critically acclaimed games, but at the same time, they, along with many other beloved developers, have secretly and slowly dripped the vials of taint in their repertoire, which leaves a bit of a bittersweet taste in my mouth. They are definitely in the list of AAA developers still making great games. Resident Evil 8, Monster Hunter, and even the soon-to-be Dragon's Dogma 2. However, one series in particular, my beloved, was the pioneer to test the waters of giant swords and an absorbent amount of DLC.
Hey yo, what the fuck?
Before I continue the rest of the video, just a fair warning, I have no personal feelings against anybody who works specifically at these companies, okay? We have no issues. I wish them all the luck that they get to make the games that they want. So we are talking about the guys who own them up here and not these guys, because they're fine. Monster Hunter World is by all means a banger of a game, being Capcom's highest sold game by quite a fucking bit.
Wow.
It has done nothing but widen its audience with future releases, which I admit I did partake in. I bought it twice on separate platforms just to play it again with my friends. I really love this game. Like, I'm not joking. This is not an exaggeration. It got many updates, collaborations, and even expansive DLCs with the same depth as the base game. But they quickly began to realize what they could get away with. By the end of Monster Hunter World's life cycle, you could spend a humble amount of $541.22 in DLC alone. But at least it's probably going into developers' pockets. You know, we did get that announcement from Capcom that they're paying developers no more. So, you know, of course you could just argue just cosmetic, but slow down a minute. We'll get there eventually. Monster Hunter World started off pretty tame, releasing just like every other multiplayer release, being completely unplayable on PC. Other than those issues though, the game was pretty gosh darn good. It only took a few months before content updates started rolling in, cosmetics being among the chunk of those updates. Something interesting about Monster Hunter World though in particular is that Capcom sort of made it clear that it was never meant to be a games as a service. Yet, contrary to what they claimed, the players' expectations slowly morphed the game into that business model. Where's more content? When are we gonna get this? When are we gonna... The sequel game in the series follows the same tradition, but this sort of poses a bigger question. At what point does that rebuttal become meaningless? Does it only matter when they start to replace content with more cosmetics? Because that's probably been happening for years already. There's that slippery slope in that example again. Capcom is probably the most blatant example of hidden in plain sight. The monetization of Street Fighter 6 is a main contender, housing all of the possible avenues for weird design choices. Things like making items just expensive enough so that you buy more currency than you actually need. And God forbid you criticize any of that though, because then you're For the time being, Capcom seems to have a seesaw balance ready to tip over at any point. Just try your mightiest to steer clear from any nonsense before it becomes a habit to them. Right now, you can probably bet on them making great games first before counting on player recurring investment. But before we get to the next company, let's talk about that statement again before we move on. It's just cosmetic or just don't buy it are among the arguments against these criticisms that I've laid out. True, those are both valid points to make. We don't care, of course. You can support the creator behind a product you enjoy perfectly fine. It's less of a problem about people partaking in these predatory practices. It becomes a blanket of a problem though when we get worse games as a result of these practices, i.e. Suicide Squad, Foam Stars, and all this entire catalog of dog shit because they just want to chase a bag. We're kind of at a point of no return though, because no company will just stop selling these $30, $40 skins when they've already been laughing to the bank for some time now. Ubisoft won't just stop making these 11 Assassin's Creed games, because apparently people make fun of Assassin's Creed, but they still line up to buy every single release. All it takes is one studio like EA to start charging $100 for video game releases before everyone else just follows suit. Not about whether Gerald wants to throw away $1,000 in Genshin Impact. Okay, like Gerald is just a loser. Bye, Gerald. Go away. Get out. Go back into your cave. The question is that if the same people who would buy like a $5 cosmetic, would you also buy the same cosmetic if it was $20? Nowadays, many people probably would, because companies don't give you that choice anymore. The perceived value of an item is drastically reduced the moment you walk into a room and 20 people also have that item. But one thing it does not get rid of is that 5-second hit of dopamine that you receive every time you see it. The second company is also of Japanese descent, one that a friend of mine is deeply in love with. They sit a little bit below the middle of this slope. Square Enix, previously known as Squaresoft, was at the forefront of innovation in RPGs, specifically with series like Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest. In 2013, however, the CEO at the time stepped down to be superseded by a man with a keen interest in the blockchain. And even up until the point where the market crumbled, he stood firm in his beliefs in the future of gaming, the infinite shit rainbow of possibilities. Don't worry, the current CEO is being replaced by another guy who is also doubling down on crypto projects. At this point, their redemption is not within reach until they rehash another version of Final Fantasy VII. I bring up Square Enix mainly for their newfounded, aforementioned, repeated attempts to break into a market that they clearly aren't making correctly. The newly released Foam Stars reveal the big, terrible, stinky cracks in their efforts. Regardless, the main game that we are focusing on today is Babylon's Fall. Now, if any of you aren't familiar with the story behind this game, it's a pretty short one. Babylon's Fall was a live service action RPG developed by Platinum Games, the studio primarily known for making single-player action games like Bayonetta and a very, very indie, unknown Metal Gear Solid game. Babylon's Fall's development started back in 2017, shortly after the success of Final Fantasy XIV Online's Stormblood expansion, even going as far as opening a new studio just to help them make new live service games. And if anyone played that game, Kojima bless your soul, it was probably the freshest cut of white bread to ever touch your lips. It had this like watery, oily, shit-covered filter over the entire game that hurts to look at, combined with a watered-down version of Nier Automata's combat system. This is another example of a single-player studio diving headfirst into a pool too deep for them. Though if you used a little bit of brain power, you could assume that Square Enix very likely scooted themselves into this game's development. Babylon's Stumble launched to negative reviews and a luscious Steam peak of 1,116 players, and subsequently the game ultimately shut down roughly a year later to no one's surprise. It's probably pretty obvious that Square Enix's slope is a safe decline with a dirty cushion waiting for them at the bottom. They still have endless opportunities to make great games with the sea of IP they have left, but they will eventually reach a point similar to Capcom where even in the good games there is a little bit of toxin injected in there. And just to be clear, I played Outriders, which is one of their looter shooter games, and it's surprisingly pretty goddamn good. Now don't take this as a high road soapbox, this is only meant to inform you that it will not go away. If it didn't work even a little bit, then they wouldn't do it. At least for smart people, we just don't engage with it if it looks like some predatory dog shit. It's as simple as that. Now before anyone starts to believe this take, it's not the consumer's fault in particular for these business practices existing. If the companies never made them in the first place, these problems wouldn't exist. My only goal is to inform people of these issues, and then from there, I let the pigeons leave from the nest and fend for themselves. The third and final company is a bit of a doozy because, for me, they have fallen into the deepest depths of shit. There aren't many companies who have reached the same point, and I'm sure many of you know exactly who I'm talking about. It's Ubisoft. Ubisoft initially started as a support business for farmers rather than a gaming company. Once upon a time did they have their time in the spotlight, but very quickly did they forget what made them dignified in the first place.
Indian Ocean. You'll start your journey as an outcast.
Gaining a lot of success with their innovative stealth action games with Splinter Cell and Assassin's Creed. Similar to Square Enix, they're on their own goose chase to imitate literally any popular trend. From Hyperscape, a very mid free-to-play battle royale, to Quartz, their attempt at creating their own cryptocurrency market. So for Ubisoft, I'm going to tackle their issues in a very weird way. Let's start with a story. My best experiences with Ubisoft is when I was unaware of their existence. You see, after graduating middle school around 2009, me and my brother's Christmas gift was a PS3 that came with a Ratchet and Clank game. It was the very first console that we had ever gotten that was actually ours. For a later birthday gift, we left GameStop with Far Cry 3.
Fuck you!
It might have been something about seeing Voss on the cover and thinking that this guy just looked fucking cool. That was the first Ubisoft game that I played and wholeheartedly enjoyed. Every single Far Cry game since that one has been almost identical to Far Cry 3. The same could be said for Assassin's Creed. So compared to the other studios in this list, they have a completely separate issue, slowly transmogrifying themselves into one-trick ponies, and even with the one thing they're supposedly good at is looking pretty stale. Skull and Bones is their latest attempt into the live service market, claiming it's the industry's first quadruple A game. From what I've seen, it's Sea of Thieves, but somehow worse. The core gameplay is around ship combat and extremely limited adventure elements. You know, it's kind of sad because Ubisoft is kind of trapped in this cycle of greed with no end in sight. They may have fallen from grace in the general gaming audience, but money talks, boys. In the first half of 2023, Ubisoft generated $885 million, a 12% increase from the same period the previous year. If we look at the industry as a slippery slope, it can only get worse, and it probably will, especially with the weird, probably misrepresented 500 studios either working or wanting to work on live service games. Whether or not that's true, I guess we'll find out very soon. It's a bit of an ugly mindset that live service games are necessary for success. The strategy has shifted from just making great games that sell to making the most profitable product possible. Phil Spencer from Xbox had a take that heavily perpetuates this narrative. He responded to commentary negatively, which claimed that if you just make good games, you could sell consoles, which he vehemently disagreed with.
I see commentary that if you just build great games, everything would turn around. It's just not true that if we go off and build great games, all of a sudden you're going to see console share shift in some dramatic way.
I'm sorry to tell you, Phil, but Nintendo and Sony have been crop dusting on Xbox's grave for decades now. Take one look at Nintendo's history of games and you'll see why the Switch is still the best-selling console over 2 generations. Microsoft's best console was the 360 because, you know, it actually had exclusives, but obviously the landscape has changed quite drastically. Multi-platform games are more likely to sell more because obviously they have more eyes on them. Sony, please more PC games because we don't want to buy your self-proclaimed dead console. Clearly customers aren't being taken as seriously as people would like to believe they are. The industry is being slowly brainwashed into believing that you must chase this trend to thrive. Even if you think a franchise or studio is safe from these temptations, trust me, with time they will buckle. Rather than using innovation to solely gain that success, they attempt to replicate someone else's success. And just to throw this in there to cover my own ass, this video is in no form to demonize the live service business model itself. I appreciate the idea of games like Helldivers 2 and Apex Legends. Lower budgets and a focus on core game design is the way to go. In fact, Apex's gunplay and movement is top tier, 10 out of 10, 100 on Metacritic. But if I have to play one more hour of battle royales, I'm gonna fucking... Games like Fortnite and Apex prove that live service games can work and be great games as well. But clearly these companies are dogpiling into the trend for the potential $1 million result. They're spending 5+ years on games like Suicide Squad or Skull and Bones, and $1 million budgets all for forgettable slop, not for the passion of it. Using their omnipotent judgment, not to take accountability for their mistakes, but to lay off hundreds of developers to cut costs for mistakes they themselves made. This philosophy is a poison that will probably kill off many studios in its wake. Now, many of you might notice there are 2 other companies I mentioned but didn't use as an example. EA and Nintendo. EA's case is pretty painfully obvious. If we have to sit down at the dinner table and have a talk about EA, then we probably have a bigger issue at hand. 3 of their games are in the list of the top earning PC and console games of 2023, and I don't have to say why, I'm sure that you already know. As for Nintendo, analyzing Nintendo is like that Dark Souls 3 meme where Yorm the Giant is towering over the Ashen. If you even have a single ethical bone in your body, being a fan of Nintendo is like an itch that you cannot reach. While on one side they have helped produce some of the best, highest quality gaming experiences to millions of people, me included, on the other side they have inflicted an equal amount of terror on a large scale, especially with litigation. Even during the scripting of this video, they went through the lengths to shut down not only the Yuzu emulator, which is a Switch emulator, but also Citra, the 3DS emulator. Let's not forget that they shut down the 3DS shop not too long ago, so to kill Citra in the crossfire is so fucking wild. And we won't even get to the flaming dog shit that is Nintendo Online. If I were to truly try my best to place them on the slope, they'd probably peer and peer. It's tough to hold Nintendo in high regard, but sadly, at the end of the day, I am a very simple man. They are unfortunately one of the few major developers that still consistently deliver great games. I just wish they weren't little bitter, slimy, dirty bitbags. That was a dubious lesson of gaming's slippery slope. There are dozens of companies and games and situations that would fit somewhere on this slope: EA, Blizzard, Embracer, etc. But these 3 AAA companies are some that I have some intimate experience with. This video has been baking in the oven for like 6 fucking months now, so it's burnt and has transformed into dust many times. It included various opinions and criticisms that have now taken the form of a mismatched pair of socks. But I'm a big boy, so I still fully believe and stand by most of what was said here. More of a guide to follow so that you don't let hype sickness catch you from loving another giant company again. Of course, as I got closer to finishing the script for the video, the games industry has been very adamant to prove points in this video right. They went ahead and old yeller some more studios and developers. Yippee! This is not a AAA gaming problem, it's a industry problem. Please, don't forget that. Ugh. Alright guys, video over. I'm gonna put this at the end of the video because I just think it'd be kind of funny to talk about money when I'm criticizing greed and all that shit. I will be launching a Patreon account for, you know, the channel. I've been doing it for about a year now and I didn't think it was worth supporting, but I feel like now that I've, you know, gotten a lot better at editing and doing a lot of these like cool creative things, I think it's probably now worth that support that I have given it myself. So like, how could I ask you to support it if I don't give it that same effort and support? So there is a few tiers that don't really mean anything. They are purely supportive just so that I can continue to make and spend time on these videos. So I thank you for potentially watching. If you've got to this point, then you probably did actually watch it. I need to go cook food because I'm hungry. So take care everyone, and don't forget everything I said, okay? Very important. Trust me, it's so important that